Evgeny, CEO of Zerion, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Peter. I'm glad to be here.
I want to do a quick intro. You're a person that probably doesn't need an intro since you've been around for a while. Zerion has a ton of users. But today we're on the show with Evgeny, co-founder and CEO of Zerion, one of the most earliest and enduring projects in crypto, been through multiple cycles. It's one of the most widely used smart wallets, and they've evolved quite a bit since they began their journey. We'll talk about how Zerion adopted through multiple market cycles and what they have planned right now and where they're going. So, Evgeny, maybe take us through the journey of Zerion, like when you guys started, how you guys started, and like how did we end up here with the current kind of product characteristics that Zerion finds itself in.
Definitely. The the story of Zerion is actually quite the unique one, I think, in crypto. We've seen so many different waves of crypto adoption and how like we've seen the rise of retail kind of in the beginning of DeFi summer, and then like the whole collapse, and it happened multiple times over the last like many years. So Zerion started in 2019 as a formal entity. We first went to market with this simple idea that actually it should be very straightforward for you to understand how much money you have. And back in the day, people were just using spreadsheets and like their notes. I don't know what, maybe Blockfolio, I think was the main product for tracking how much money, how much like Bitcoin and ETH and tokens you've invested in. So this was like state of art situation on the market. But at the same time, the number of tokens was growing. The complexity of on-chain things was like exploding. DeFi summer was happening. Like it was 2019, early DeFi protocols were appearing. So we thought like it's a very simple idea that you can just plug in your wallet address and you should be able to see all of the money. And this defined the foundation for Zerion in the beginning. So we started with that, and we've built the system to really index all of this information and provide that at like in a glance, in a split of a second, to any wallet address available on chain. And this is how we started. And obviously, as we started integrating more and more DeFi capabilities inside Zerion, like swaps, we were the first Uniswap integration ever, like external from Uniswap. Same with like Compound, Maker as well, with like were external interfaces to all this recent DeFi protocols. We realized that we cannot really progress further in terms of simplifying user experience beyond where we were if we are not moving towards becoming a wallet. So in 2022, we really became full-fledged wallet. We released first on mobile, and then later we released the extension. And since then, like we really think of Zerion as the wallet first product. And currently about most of our users, overwhelming majority of our users, they use Zerion primarily as their main wallet, and only like second as a portfolio tracker. But recently, in the last few years, we've released more products as well to the market. So the two I want to mention is obviously the Zero Network that we released last year. And the product that is like, I guess not many people on the retail side are familiar with. Zerion has been around with our API product, which has been widely successful, especially in the beginning of this year. It will start exploding in the adoption, mainly because the institutions and other companies are moving towards on-chain. So they're moving like because of the changes in regulation and just broader I guess sentiment towards crypto adoption. I think there's more and more demand for indexing and allowing building better experiences for the end consumers without all of the hustle of building on-chain infrastructure. So we are helping users, helping like other businesses with that through our API product. So yeah, that's
Wow.
full range. Yeah, a lot of
No,
things.
I,
Happy to
I
unpack.
I love it. I want to tell you a quick story. So I was very, very early in 2016 or so. And I remember I was in a Telegram group, or I think maybe back then it was like a Slack group where, we would share kind of like tools that we were using. And then a couple of years
The
after
Alpha
that,
Group.
something like that. And then a couple of years after that, so Blockfolio became big and we were all using Blockfolio. And then someone in the group said, hey, they got acquired by, I think it was CoinMarketCap acquired them.
Yeah, I think so.
And then one of the people in the group said, well, we have to stop using it now. but there's this other thing coming up, and then everyone in the group started using Zerion. And
Nice.
it was really crazy because it was like almost like a really natural thing, and like a almost like a protest against, well, Blockfolio was
Hmm.
cool, but now they're like part of them. So we're gonna go over here. And I love that transition, that and also the adoption cycle.
But we
You
shouldn't be
know,
acquired, right, by anybody.
no, no,
So we
you guys are
I take your point.
such a big business now. I mean, I love the adoption cycle of going from initially a tracker, which gets a lot of users, and then over time, like became a more sophisticated tracker, then a full-fledged wallet, adding services, and now you guys have an API business where now other businesses can use Zerion as a platform, and that's really exciting. And I'd like to get into that. Also, tell us about, like, I guess, in the transition, like during this adoption cycle, as you beautifully went from a tracker to a wallet to adding swaps, like from a product perspective and user perspective, like I'd love to have been in those discussions where, hey, maybe, we have a bajillion people using the tracker now. Maybe we should do something else. Like, what were those conversations like as you progress from one kind of like main product feature to another?
That's a good question, and I think honestly, I don't know how other companies approach that. And I think some like at times Zerion is different in that capacity because we've been always more I would say thoughtful looking at the market. And sometimes it can be a blessing and a curse. At times we would be slower to react to some things because we're like, okay, we're not too compelled by what is happening. Like it doesn't feel right for us to completely, throw everything out and go there. But at like other times, it helped us a lot because we were able to anticipate a lot of this market shifts and transitions, and where we need to be like, what's the next phase of Zerion? Because the market, obviously, you've been in crypto for a while. Like the market is volatile and very volatile to an extent of many companies die in this different phases. So we have to be very much thoughtful about these transitions. So the discussions, the way we usually do that is we bring in different people from from the company, and we have like this. Now it's much more institutionalized, I would say. So we have this like quarterly strategic sessions. Before it was more like ad hoc but similar cadence, and we would just raise the most relevant hard questions. Do we believe that being, for example, just a tracker is enough for us to move forward? Like what are some signs, for example, or market trends and shifts or demands from the user side that we can address that are kind of in like close proximity of where we exist? From these discussions, we give like different product directions we are creating, and we're deciding to focus on something new to continue evolving. Yeah, this has been the process so far, and I wouldn't say it was perfect. Sometimes, like when it comes to some of the features that we've built, they were a little bit too early. And for example, this whole zero network, I think, was a little bit too early, and in a sense of like we now see the stable and tempo going into the direction of no transfers, no fees for making stablecoin transfers, like making stablecoin chains that are specifically designed for this kind of use cases. And we've been with Zero Network, we've been kind of a little bit one step there, but it wasn't fully clear how exactly that's supposed to look like. So I think that's on one side we were early with our I would say NFT feature. We were pretty late to the game and not particularly compelled, and maybe for the better because NFTs were like a big disappointment in the last couple of years, but recently making a comeback. So I'm more excited about NFTs in like other formats, like RWA type of contexts or more utility focused NFTs. So yeah, that's been our process, I guess. Pretty natural for us.
Yeah, the adoption cycle for Zerion sounds very natural. It, I'd love to hear more about how you involve users because, well, in crypto, there's a lot of like infra projects, but not a ton of like applications that are very kind of user focused, user centric, and I'm really intrigued by those types of applications, and to the extent that they involve actual users and do user research, that type of thing, because it's just doesn't happen a lot in crypto. In in crypto, most of it's like you kind of build something and then you hope people will come and start using it. But you guys actually can know like, okay, here's kind of like some habits and behaviors people are doing, and we need to kind of adjust to meet that.
Yeah. I think and especially recently, we became really good at this. Obviously, there's no ceiling, but I'm pretty proud of what the team was able to do with regards to our decision making process on the product side. I mean, first we've been pretty early on obsessed about analytics, and we didn't want analytics to compromise the privacy. So we've built so much to really segregate the user information, user data from the analytics insights that we gain from that data. So it's like a whole another topic that I don't want to go into yet. But speaking of the analytics, data is king when making these decisions. So looking at retention of different user groups, we can derive insights about the patterns of usage and who's growing, like what kind of user behavior is there and which behaviors are not like kind of ceasing to exist. And in crypto, it's particularly, I think, hard because a lot of people are just chasing yield or chasing tokens or chasing alpha. So it feels like you're onto something, and the next moment the alpha is not there. No one actually is interested in, let's say, Web3 gaming whatsoever. And
Mhm.
just a few months ago, it was like the hottest thing, and everybody was gaming and doing this and that. So I think it's just, it's obviously you need to be looking at data and be also very in the trenches to understand what is actually going on. And I guess on the other side, like on the user interview side, I think for Zerion, we have always run this roadmap.zerion.io thing since like early days, where people vote for different features or different token integrations or and chains. We've been using that as our guide, but more recently we started doing again, because of the market shift. I would say that started this year. We've started doing like another rounds and rounds of new user interviews to get to a better understanding of the new user to come. So I think previously the market was, I mean, if we're putting it in this like buckets, it was mainly innovators and early adopters. Versus now we're shifting to actually like the early majority type of audience, and their demands and the way they want to be using this technology is different. So that's why we thought we need to readapt to that as well. So
Yeah,
speaking of like the upcoming transitions,
I love it. And you guys were also very early to mobile, which is probably a whole different user type.
yeah,
I know looking
still
at
the
my
main for us.
Yeah, which is really incredible because I think you guys went to mobile when almost everything else was on desktop, and so it was like people go left and you guys went right, and that turned out to be like the right direction. What's the most surprising? So looking at all the user behavior, can you share maybe like one or two like really surprising things that you thought was that just like surprised you in the product team? That's something you guys didn't expect.
I can share a few recent ones. Like the one that really got me was that a lot of people were so happy to see the desktop view in the dApp browser on mobile. And the reason being that a lot of people are using our dApp browser from their mobile phones because they're claiming some airdrops. They're going to like test nets and testing a bunch of different dApps that are being released. And for it's important, like they don't have really a desktop and they want to do a lot of things on mobile, and all of these websites are really not meant for being used from mobile. So that was like one of the praised features that I had no idea that was necessary for so many people. And I guess like another one that I was surprised with is really how much like testnet usage we're getting. Obviously, it's like fluctuating, and but people are obviously hunting for new gems all the time, and the usage of different airdrops, of different networks, test nets connected to the upcoming airdrops. Obviously, it spikes. Kind of, it's not so impressive, but I didn't know how much of an activity would be happening on test nets. Yeah, that's like a
Yeah,
particular user group, though.
I think if we looked at like the root cause of that, I bet it's a lot of the test nets recently, they've come up with this kind of a really interesting mechanic where they have these tap games where
Yeah,
and you're on a timer where you could harvest something for, I don't know, like if you harvest something and then you let it grow and you have to come back like the next, like within 8 hours or after 8 hours to harvest it again to get more gems or points. And I saw like at least in the last probably 6 to 12 months, multiple testnet kind of incentivized test nets that did that kind of thing. And It was really interesting and it actually worked. But the other problem is that now it's like from a geographic perspective, it created lots of farmers that later will not become users. And so that kind of created a whole different problem for these networks, which brings
Yeah,
me to an interesting question around Monad recently did their airdrop claim yesterday, and there was a lot of controversy with not including specific countries. And so from a you see all this data on the back end, and I'd be really curious to see kind of where your users are from, if that's something that you're able to share. And does it give you a sense of like crypto adoption?
yeah,
I've always
good
heard that
question.
like the Philippines, for example, is like the MetaMask usage there is really huge. But
Probably
I've
coming
always
from
what
Axie Infinity.
yeah, exactly, during the Axie Infinity craze. But I wonder like what if it does it actually tell us anything about crypto adoption?
Hmm. It's a good question. We had some like it was a beef on Twitter. I forgot the name of the person, but it was really about like so he put up a tweet saying that they're banning all of the users from Nigeria and some other
Yeah.
country that they were seeing because like the KYC cost is pretty significant. And I understand that. We're lucky in that sense that we don't have the KYC cost associated with the usage. So for us, it's like it's pretty much the same if the user like regardless of where they're coming from. So we can serve all the users, and we're blessed because of that. So I'm happy. The really the conversation was there like how much of a real user is like are these people, and I think you put it right that for some of these games or maybe incentivized test nets, not every user is going to convert into an actual retail user who's going to like stick to the product. But from the wallet perspective, and the point being like coming back to MetaMask, right? They did retain all of these users who onboarded through Axie Infinity. So Axie Infinity was really the entry point for them to get into crypto, but they moved on to something else and they continued to use MetaMask. So really for MetaMask, it's actually a great thing. So all of these users are actually real users to the degree that they have some assets now, they have the wallet, they can use it, they can start like exchanging, swapping, finding new airdrops. So I'm much more open from that perspective. I think we all start somewhere. Like in some sense, like every person in crypto is a farmer because like you found something early and you're like alpha seeking behavior. It's just on a different scale. Some people start with just $1. Some people start with tens of thousands of dollars to find some alpha and to make it big. So we don't discriminate. We try to serve as many countries as possible legally. And speaking of the geography of our user base, we've been still heavily dominated by the Western world, especially on the mobile app side of things. So the US and Europe, I think combined is still the number like 1 and 2. And then on extension, I think the top country is becoming Nigeria or like is already Nigeria, and that's quite interesting. And we still see the US and other like Western countries, but it's pretty global. If we look at the whole distribution, yeah, it's for me. It just tells that crypto adoption happens pretty much universally, and we had these discussions internally, like should we go into a very specific niche market and start like really, becoming a country-specific wallet, and the decision was that it just goes against what we believe and what we want to create. That's why we kind of kept to the original ethos and stick to the plan of being the global product from day one.
Yeah. And I think that makes sense. And I think going the geo approach is probably really hard also. I once worked for excuse me, a company in the genealogy space. And genealogy, the product itself is such where you actually need a location in each of these countries in which you provide research information. And so, for example, I helped launch the Italy website, the Germany website, and these websites provided like, if you wanted to find your ancestry in Germany, then you would go there and you would, see all their records and all of that. But like launching to specific localities, it's like, it's a lot of work. And you also actually need like boots on the ground there and people and a team. And anyway, that's like a long way to say that's like the geo approach is really hard.
I would say like the global approach is also hard. Everything is hard
Yeah.
in a way. Like You
Yeah,
can end up being everywhere, but not any like in anywhere in particular. So it's always, the business decision, right?
yeah,
Um,
yeah.
and business is hard.
I want to talk a little bit about the mobile approach. For the same company that I worked at, and we had a mobile product also, and the way we launched it, and I don't know if you guys have done this with Zerion, but we actually could launch it in very specific zip codes of the US first. And then we would kind of go out from there. And we had a very really tight experiment that helped us to be able to tweak the go to market and the product at the zip code level.
Mm.
I'm curious if you guys have for the mobile approach, if you guys have done something like that, or I mean that would just be really curious, especially for like a crypto project to be that sophisticated.
Yeah. So we haven't done anything like that. So we've been rolling out pretty much straight to all countries. We didn't think about that in the early days. We just felt that the good mobile products are missing, and we got to fill the gap. We do run a lot of A/B tests now. They're not. I mean, some of the experiments we run are geo focused, but it's mainly because of like we cannot run the experiment other way, for example. So we've done that recently over the summers. For example, with fees, we're experimenting with fees and seeing like what's the response like, and we're doing that per country. But most of the time, we're doing just product iterations, and we're testing that on the whole user base. But it's a nice approach, like when you're rolling something new to segregate that by. Yeah, I guess one interesting thing that we've done was when we were launching our loyalty campaign and the network. We've done a bit of separation, like segregation of users by their previous on-chain experience and their on-chain behaviors. So we would put them in different levels based on what they've been able to do, like with Zerion and externally. So kind of like calculating their scores and their level based on their past activity, which was quite an interesting exercise that we've done.
That's cool. In that same company, just so you know, if you ever want to do any experiments in the US and you want to focus on like high
Zip code
school,
level.
yeah, at the zip code level, there's a zip code in Georgia where actually the first school that it's the first school district that opens in the year. And
Mm.
doing tests in that zip code is very interesting because it gives you a peek into if it does well in the zip code when the high school starts, how well could it do in other high schools as the zip codes kind of open up? Anyway, that was just kind of an aside, but a really I wish like more we could do more of those types of experiments in crypto. I think we'll get there.
Yeah,
Why
I
do you
think it was
think
just not like the crypto marketing was not on the same level. I
not
think
yet?
crypto marketing was like, it still is in many companies from what we see, like it's still limited. And many people, because of the nature of the industry and the kinds of people it attracted, and I think this anti like ads ethos created a different marketing structure for
Yeah,
these teams. It's very different from like a traditional, say you're launching an app, a consumer app. You obviously need to know really well how your performance marketing is doing versus in crypto. There was no performance marketing up until recently because everything was banned. So if you don't
yeah,
have performance marketing, everybody needs to survive somehow. And you go and like really start reinventing a bunch of these things from scratch. And yeah, it's not fun, but also fun if you're like into pain.
yeah. You mentioned performance marketing opened up recently. I didn't know about that. I thought it was still you still couldn't run ads. Can
It's
you share a
opening
little
up,
bit
I
more?
would say.
It's
Yeah,
opening up.
I wouldn't say it's like fully open. It's still problematic. It's not like a green light on everything, but there are platforms where you can start doing things in certain capacity. I mean, there's always like app store ads
Mm,
and stuff like that. And Google is also working more with crypto companies. So yeah, it's opening up. I wouldn't say it's very effective yet, but it's
yeah. Going back to the geo kind of topic, why do you think Nigeria is growing so fast? I spoke with another founder who actually lived in Nigeria. She's Chinese, and she's the founder of a very big project that is going to have a TG at some point this month or next month. But she actually lived in Nigeria for 2 years, and we had a really good conversation about that. She just kind of travels all over the world and lives wherever, but she didn't go to Nigeria for any reason. But I'm hearing more and more that it's like the crypto is just growing so fast there.
Yeah, yeah, it is. I recently had a conversation with our ambassador, actually. His Twitter handle is the Rater, and he was just giving me feedback about our ambassador program and like the growth of Zerion in Nigeria. So it was actually a very interesting conversation. It's a different market. First of all, obviously, there's a lot of people in Nigeria. There's like, I think, coming up to 300 million people. I think 280 or something, if I remember correctly. So it's a really big country with a lot of people who are interested in obviously English speaking, and that means pretty much immediate access to a bunch of the crypto information, because like obviously crypto is not as it seems global, but it's still English primarily, and it becomes harder if you're like you don't speak English to really find this opportunity. So I think that's really like the main drivers to Nigerian crypto adoption. And obviously like the local payment rails are not satisfactory for many people. So crypto is like a way to make it big. That's true for many other countries as well, but I think Nigeria, just because of its size, has started to grow. And I don't know if this is like a Zerion specific phenomenon, but yeah, for us, it's a good growing market.
Yeah, I hear it's a really young population too.
Yes,
There's
yeah, that's
just
true.
the demographics are just a lot of young people. I'm learning a lot about Korea recently and our
Yeah,
kind
I
of
heard
an
that too.
expansion. Projects want to expand into Korea because it's such a big crypto hub, right? But it's a really hard market to really expand into.
Hmm.
I'm curious to the extent that you're able to share, like what is like I guess what's Zerion's experience in Korea, and what do we know about the users there?
I would need to go back to give you very specific insights, but what I remember, we've done this research maybe 4 months ago or so. When we looked at it, Korea was on a target list actually of countries where we want to expand and continue pushing, because honestly, it was just the revenue per user was higher than average for some reason. So I think like people there were trading more.
Hmm.
And yeah, I think that's the reason why many people want to go and many companies want to be in Korea, because retail users are just making more bets and buying more tokens and are excited about crypto. So I think, yeah, their use cases are really to buy the right thing and to like invest in crypto rather than say like um, even in Nigeria, right? Like the average revenue per user is smaller because a lot of them are trying to find like opportunities to win some kind of airdrop. And that's fine. That's just a different way of making it. But that doesn't always create the same like revenue for the projects going there. So I think like South Korea from that perspective is a lucrative market.
Yeah, maybe I can share with you a couple of things that I've learned about the South Korean market. It turns out that the average, like the demographic in terms of age, they're actually much older than probably your typical crypto user. And so like when we're looking at like 35 plus are people that are very, very active and also have capital to which is really interesting because I think for the price, at least in the United States, I'm guessing the demographic is a lot younger than 35 to 50 plus are the folks that, based on kind of my research. And then the next question is like, why is that? It turns out that in South Korea, there's kind of a couple of like really large families that are well off, but then everyone else are don't have those opportunities, and so they're almost using crypto as like a lottery ticket. Like, and a lot of the older folks in the 35 plus range, like they're very, very active. That's why it's like the kimchi premium on Upbit. It's like why is that? It's because it's like that age group is
I
like they
remember
are
this year's.
just gambling like crazy.
Yeah. I have a personal anecdote because I lived in Korea in Seoul for
Mm.
about 4 months, and that was during the 2019 era, so just like early days of Zerion in some sense. And I remember that I was on a bus, and it was just a guy sitting there casually trading like thousands of dollars of Bitcoin at Bitcomp, and just like sitting, next to me pretty much. And I haven't seen that anywhere else pretty much in any other country that I've been to or lived in. No one was like no one on the bus is trading Bitcoin from mobile. It's like it was just a browser. So BitHub app opened, not even an app, like a website opened in the browser and swapping things. So yeah, that was pretty cool to see.
That's cool. Let's talk about you mentioned the API product. I would love to hear more about like what is the name and how you guys are rolling it out and like who's using it, that type of thing. And, give us a sense into that product launch.
Definitely. It's interesting that the name is actually Zerion API. So if you have a better name for that one, we've decided to stick to the Zerion API because this is already became a pretty known thing. We didn't want to move away from Zerion because a lot of people come to us because the most common request is that I've been using Zerion and I want this in my product. How do I get that? And this is where the Zerion API really comes in. And we've started with that product about at this point, I think 2 years ago, or maybe even more than that, when we actually productized it, as in started putting it to the public. And before it was used by some customers without even being a publicly available thing. And the moment we launched it, it was just getting more and more traction. And as I mentioned already, in 2025, it's just started becoming like a bigger thing. I think mainly it's connected to the rise of the number of layer twos and just the complexity is growing even on the infrastructure side. So if previously you had Ethereum and that was like the only thing where people were building, then we suddenly started having, all the layer twos and complexity around DeFi continued to increase. Number of tokens is like crazy. Then we had Solana entering the consumer market. So if you are trying to build a wallet, like a non-custodial wallet, using all of these blockchains, you need to have support for all of this layer twos. Otherwise, the user are going to complain, right? Like if they don't see their assets on a particular chain, if they cannot use a certain app, if your wallet doesn't support that chain, it's problematic. And users always want like what's the new and hot new thing that is coming up. Say like Mona is around the door, like, and people want to trade things on Mona. They need to have the support, and if your wallet is not there, yeah, what are you going to do? You're going to start losing users. So for many companies, it became obvious that building this infrastructure in-house is going to take, first, a very long time, but also maintaining that infrastructure is expensive. Like Zerion API just came in as a convenient product to help on that front, because building integrating the custody of the keys, you have Privy, for example, or maybe you do that locally somehow. There are different ways of solving that, but actually fetching the data from the blockchain is like in some sense unsolved problem. The RPCs are very low level infrastructure, so you still need to build a lot of things on top. So yeah, that's how the Zerion product and the Zerion API came about. And in terms of the main customers, we have quite a few of them mentioned on the website. So the main ones are companies like Rainbow, our big friends, and Uniswap Wallet, for example. Quite a few. So we have like over 380 different teams using the API for various reasons. And that's been growing quite well recently.
So there's kind of like a sense of co-opetition almost, because Rainbow, on one sense, is a competitor, yet they're using one of the Zerion products. How do you deal with that?
It's a good question. We thought about that in the beginning, how hard it's going to be like to be on both sides of this equation. We think that first, the wallet market is not one where winner takes all. And if we were not there to provide this information, they would need to go somewhere else to find it, right? And there's going to be competition there anyways. And we've built all of that data in-house. So it's really that like why we just believe we're not taking away from the main product. We're expanding the market with this API thing, because a lot of these wallets that are launching, they are bringing their own user bases already. So yeah, they would bring these users to their products regardless of what is powering. So we see that as an expansionary move on our end. And like think of kind of, if we extend our thinking beyond just the current crypto market, we can look at companies like, say, TikTok, right? They would at some point want to launch a version of some kind of tokenized products inside. So maybe like tokenizing some of the rewards, maybe loyalty, maybe different tokens that you tip with to the streamers and things like that. And they would want to, it's very likely that they wouldn't want to control over that. So they wouldn't want to turn into a bank and have all the licenses in every country. So instead, they would go the simpler route, which is becoming a non-custodial wallet. And from that perspective, we would be the right partner to them to support their growth on the non-custodial wallet side rather than them building the whole infra side themselves. So yeah, that's how we think about it. And I don't think it really competes with the user base that is looking specifically for a wallet like Zerion product.
I love that philosophy because I think in crypto we have too much PvP and not enough like the grow the pie together kind of thinking. And I agree with you. I mean, the wallet market is the TAM, I'm sure, is massive. I don't know what it is, but I'm sure there's going to be lots and lots of winners in the wallet space.
Yeah, and hopefully one winner in the infrastructure side.
Yeah, I think when I think of Zerion, I think of the moat is initially I thought, okay, the moat are users because they have a lot of users and we don't know how many, but I'm assuming there's a lot because you guys are kind of one of the first in the category. But another moat is like the amount of information and data that you know about without knowing any self-identifying information, but you know a lot about the user and user behavior, geography, and like how they crypto and how they use crypto. That kind of information is so valuable that I think Zerion API like just makes so much sense. And if I were a business, I would definitely want to tap into that so that I could help grow my business and with some intelligence using the Zerion API. Do you guys think about data like that? I mean, now it's like monetizable, but did you think that this would eventually become a moat for you?
Can you see my video, by the way? I think it disconnected for a second. Is it all good?
Sorry. Yeah, you're good.
Okay. Yeah, it's a great question. So we always thought about data as a moat. I think the main reason is that the whole crypto is public, right? Like the on-chain information is all public, but only portion of that matters in some sense. So only the portion of that is retail user base that is actively like making this like taker order flow rather than the maker order flow or like a bot order flow. So it is definitely a valuable information. I think on the API side, we haven't yet done any of the work that would benefit from this aggregated view that we have. But we're planning to release more of that. So the idea is pretty simple here is that as we see more of this information coming from the API partners, we can start exposing some of these endpoints, like, for example, the most popular tokens that people are trading to these customers themselves. So they can increase, for example, their trading revenues or have better insights into the market by tapping into the aggregated view of the Zerion usage. So it's one of the next steps for us, I would say, but we haven't done that right now.
I think that'll be huge. I mean, super valuable. And I can
I'm
see
still
there's
waiting. Sorry, just like
sorry.
you remind me that like we're yet to start our trading division at some point.
Oh yeah.
We haven't done that yet, but probably it's like the most profitable thing we could do is just launch our trading arm.
Which reminds me, I've met with multiple perps dexes, founders of perps dexes recently. And what I'm finding really, really interesting is that, you know, a lot of these projects, they start out as a perps dex, which has a really large addressable market, but then they're kind of verticalizing where you see some perps dexes and they're adding a spot feature. And then some of them are also adding borrow and lend kind of integration where you can borrow and then use what you borrow to trade and then pay it back. And kind of like the verticalizing approach is really interesting. And I haven't seen that a lot in crypto, but I see a similar thing within the kind of the smart wallet category. And it makes sense, right? Because to provide a really good user experience, you need to be able to control these features for the user so that you can manage it and provide them features that kind of meet their needs. What do you think about the verticalizing approach, and how does that kind of jive or uh, I guess reconcile with this idea of like decentralization and like is there a conflict there?
Yes, I think there's definitely a conflict between verticalization and the protocol nature of crypto. So that's why I'm more of the believer in the barbell model for crypto specifically. I think when we're speaking about the internet, it's all turning into the distribution controls it all to the degree that like you can start messing around with the underlying protocols for your benefit in some sense. So we see that like the internet does not really look like it used to look like. So even though we still rely on the HTTP and IP kinds of protocols, I think they are becoming increasingly irrelevant in the context of modern internet reality. Versus in crypto, I would expect this to be barbell in a sense, again, that on one side we would still have this very, very deeply integrated into everything protocols like Bitcoin, Ethereum, etc. And on the other hand, we'll have a bunch of like companies relying on their distribution and they leveraging this technology, but they wouldn't be able to move fully away from the native underlying protocols, because otherwise they would lose completely the trust and access of some kind. So that's my theory. Obviously, it's like time will tell how this is going to evolve. I'm optimistic that this is possible to maintain and we're not going to fall into the same thing that happened with the internet. But coming back to this idea of verticalization, I think it's happening. And in crypto specifically, it's everywhere. We look at, I think the ones who are making money, right? Like the exchanges primarily, we see them verticalizing a lot. So they launch their launchpads, they launch their wallets, they launch their perp products. They have everything. And we see even like looking at Uniswap as an example, being the most popular DEX, they starting to verticalize across the board. So they would launch it. They have a chain, they have their own wallet. So it's all about serving the user from different perspectives. Yeah, I think this is as a trend will just continue increasing, and the price of building on this infrastructure goes down. So if previously you needed like way more things to start your layer 2 or build your DeFi protocol, it's just an amount of investment and knowledge that you need to have was really high. Versus right now, if you want to launch your own stablecoin, if you want to launch your layer 2, if you want to launch your wallet, thanks, for example, to Zerion API, all of this like costs are going down. And that means that companies like Stripe or I don't know, TikTok, as an example, can build all of that stack in a matter of less than a year, or maybe if they're really serious about it, in like months. Yeah, I think that's just going to be the case moving forward.
Looking forward in the next, 3, 6, 9, 12 months or so, what are some things that you'd like to share about Zerion and any work that you guys are doing that you want to, I guess, promote and bring more attention to?
Definitely. We're doing exciting things on multiple fronts. I would start with the Zerion wallet itself. So it's obviously the wallet of choice for many people. We continue iterating and innovating on the wallet. The cool things that are happening right now is the feed, which it's currently in like test flight. And for many, it's going to be the experience that you're going to have is that you'll see all of the people that are making different transactions and trades on chain. You'll be able to see that very early and copy trade what they've been doing. So I think that's pretty exciting. Also, you'll be able to find the most profitable traders and early surface the opportunities to you. So that's on the wallet side, and we have some cool stuff as well, but that's kind of similar to what many wallets are working on. So having all the perps and integrations with prediction markets and stuff like that, and we're excited to start bringing many of these things into native wallet experience. And speaking of the API, we're putting a lot of effort there, coming up with new customers are joining. A lot of new teams are starting to use our Solana endpoints. We recently released that on the API level. We're seeing a big gap in the Solana market in terms of data pricing for assets. It's just very complex in terms of scale. So we're happy to be one of the data providers of choice for many, and excited to see how the Solana market is going to grow because of that. Yeah, and we're releasing more endpoints as well. So webhooks, PNL is being reworked and improved on, and our DeFi handlers, etc., etc. So yeah, good things happening on the API. So if you're building for the blockchain, it's a great thing to start with.
A lot of things going on. I want to get personal a little bit. You've been in the space for a while, and I'm curious to know how you have evolved as a founder, since you founded Zerion.
Great question. Yeah, I've been in crypto for like now probably 10 years, which is quite crazy. I think the industry is changing a lot towards financialization, I would say, of the industry. And I think myself, I would mention first thing that changed about me is I became more pragmatic, I think. And this is, there are still things that I believe in and that that I don't want to compromise on. But I think there were things where I was just blind and very little understanding about how people function or what people want. And you're coming as an early stage founder, you're coming in with a lot of ideas that this needs to work this way. Sometimes you're right, and that helps you break the first, doors and get into the first successes. But over time, you start building more of a skill to understand what people actually want instead of just relying on what you think is right. Yeah, I think this is one big thing. But yeah, coming back to the whole audience and this shift from innovators and early adopters of the technology, I think this shift is pretty dramatic for crypto, and we are only seeing it now. I think previously I was saying that like all of the attempts by big companies, it was really spending the R&D money, and I think right now it's really the shift that is happening. I think we need to adapt from being I guess just a crypto bro type of person in team or anywhere on the street. Like you need to adjust to actually, and your product needs to adjust. It needs to really drastically simplify. It needs to compete with Revolut. So that means for us as founders in the crypto space, we need to be more agile, more smart about how we go about things. We need to be ruthless as well and like build out proper marketing, not just let's just throw tokens around and everything's going to be fine.
Well, Evgeny, thank you so much this was a really great conversation. I think Zerion is one of the kind of the staples in crypto, if I can call it that, where it's been there since the beginning and has really helped to shape how crypto users kind of interact and use crypto. And that's quite historical. I don't mean to be dramatic there, but really, like, as long as I've been in crypto, Xeron is just one of the key things that I've kind of thought about. I will be sure to
Thank you.
share, yeah, and I'll be sure to share, all of the URLs and in the show notes and other things. Is there anything else that you want to talk about that we haven't yet?
I think this is we've covered a lot of important points, so we can start wrapping up here. But thanks a lot for a lot of the questions and going deeper on some of them, and yeah, going a bit personal. I like that.
Awesome. Well, Evgeny, thank you so much. Zerion's awesome, and I'm a big fan. And I'm sure most of the listeners are users, and so I think they'll enjoy listening to this episode. So thank you.
Thank you so much. Have a good one.